What a beautiful day. Senator Warner and I just completed a nearly 3-hour meeting with an amazing delegation of Virginians making the case that the best site for FBI's future headquarters, an investment that will likely be an investment of a half century or more, is in Springfield, Virginia. I'm going to start off by saying this. You are not going to hear Senator Warner and I say anything negative about the Maryland sites. We are not here to say anything negative about other sites. We were here to promote the Virginia site. The FBI and GSA worked together, and they've worked together on this now for more than a decade, and they wrote criteria under which this decision would be made. We didn't write the criteria, we didn't recommend them, we didn't modify them. Maryland didn't write the criteria, recommend, modify. What we have done is, once the criteria are on the table, we've made the case that the Springfield site best meets the criteria. The most important is compatibility with the mission of the FBI. This is the nation's security that we're talking about. That has to be the primary component, and we believe, for dozens of reasons, the siting of FBI in close proximity to so many sister agencies who have to work together, not in silos, they have to work together. The Virginia site is so strong. Second, the flexibility of the site itself and the suitability of the site itself. Nearby sites include Northern Virginia Community College and the TSA. This site works not only for the FBI of today, it will work for the FBI of 50 years from now. Third, transportation access. This is walking distance from Metro, from VRE, from a transportation hub in Fairfax County that brings in bus and express buses from all over, not just Fairfax, but all over the region. Fourth, cost. This is an area where some folks have misrepresented the costs of this site. The costs of this site are very, very favorable to the cost of any other site, principally because the land is already owned by the federal government, which is a significant cost savings over at least one of the alternatives. And finally, equity and sustainability. We applaud the Biden administration. We applaud the GSA and the FBI for the first time in a siting of this kind to include a significant priority that's measured, that has to count in terms of whether the site promotes equity. The Springfield area is one of the most diverse parts of this Commonwealth or this country. 55% of households in the area, the language spoken in the home is not English. It is a United Nations, but more than the United Nations, it's a true reflection of who Virginia is and who America is, and we believe the equity component is a necessary and important one. We hope that it sets a template for site selections to come, that should be an important component. But we believe very strongly that Springfield knocks it out of the park on that as the other criteria. I've been involved in this as a Virginia senator, but I want to now bring the senior senator who has been involved in it deeply, not only as the senator who lives in Northern Virginia, but as somebody whose leadership in the Senate on matters of intelligence and national security give him a unique perspective, particularly with respect to the mission compatibility of the Springfield site for FBI future headquarters. Mark.
Well, thank you, Tim, and Andrea and Irma, thank you for being here. We have about 35 or 40 folks who are part of our presentation. They may be trickling out. We've got to do this presentation, take a question or two, and then rush back because the IRS commissioner is up for a vote, and I think they need our votes so that we can make sure the IRS becomes a more useful and user-friendly entity. I'm going to start on equity and move through the criteria. We've already made mention of the Springfield itself being majority minority, other than English first language. Andrea represents parts of Prince William where Quantico is, again, majority minority. Arlington, Alexandria, hugely diverse populations. But one of the things that was really, I think, meaningful when we heard from President Washington at GMU and heard from Marymount, I challenge anyone. Marymount, one of the Hispanic serving universities, only a few in the whole country, 2/3 female, huge number of language spoken at Marymount University. Those are the kind of people we need as FBI agents. George Mason. George Mason is the most, I think President Washington said, either one or two most diverse universities in the whole country. Don't believe me? Go to the George Mason campus and walk around, and you see the new face of Virginia, and you see the new face of Virginia there. We had an individual representing the Muslim community inside who talked about a 20-year partnership with the FBI in a community that is extraordinarily strong in Virginia. That we need that partnership. We need more FBI agents of multiple faiths. So we are happy to go against any location on the diversity standpoint. Needs of the FBI. It has been stunning to me that some have said that maybe the needs of the FBI somehow shouldn't be as considered so highly. In the end of the day, we're making it a 50-year decision for the men and women of the FBI. The idea that proximity to Quantico, I think there are 2,400 trips a day or a month or whatever, a week, and we'll clarify that. Come on back over here, guys. That's a relevant criteria. You can't take that away. I mean, matter of fact, Quantico has been mentioned on the FBI process at least the last 8 or 9 years in the federal documentation of language that has been bounced around along the way. We had a great long-term intelligence professional who I think spoke extraordinarily movingly about how after 9/11 we had the intelligence, but we didn't work together. And the idea that the need to have the FBI interact with the CIA, the ODNI, the NRO, the NGA, and a host of other entities that are in Northern Virginia that you all are not even cleared to know about is absolutely critical if we're going to build that community need. And we talk again about particularly the immigrant community that's moved in. They have moved into this community in Northern Virginia because Virginia, and we think about it back when we were governor, Governor Youngkin was with us today, Virginia made the investments that maybe other communities didn't on education. We have some of the greatest public schools in America in Northern Virginia. We've got the best high school in America in Northern Virginia. That's a plus. That is a plus for the FBI. And we had not only intelligence professionals, but FBI veterans speak to that. So we've talked about diversity. We've talked about a bit about the needs, the long-term needs of the FBI. Let me talk about the cost issue. The current tenet, first conversation starting about moving the tenet in the public domain started in 1989. I'm chair of the Intelligence Committee. For 3 presidents, Obama, Trump, and Biden, the tenet has decided they need to move. They are moving regardless of what happens with the FBI decision. To indicate otherwise is just not true. And the cost of moving is going to take place regardless. So the idea that the FBI can come into this site federally owned and move quickly, and the economic development package that we put forward is second to none. Transportation. Tim and I joked a little bit that, with Glenn there, that traffic was better when we were governors. But traffic really wasn't better in the Springfield Mixing Bowl when we were governor. The idea of the literally hundreds of millions, it may have actually crossed over to the billion-dollar number in terms of transportation investments in the Mixing Bowl, hot lanes, 22 bus trips a day that go from this site exist, the metro right there, 4 different interstate highways that converge right there at Springfield on a transportation basis, whether you are riding, taking the bus, taking the train, riding a bike. This site is superior in all of those criteria. Flexibility of the site, government owned. Again, Rodney Lusk, who is the supervisor from Springfield, having a local elected official, and Rodney's background was he was an economic development expert. Having that kind of local government individual committed to making the process of local approvals move quickly, you can't, that is an incredibly important asset. And the fact that it is a site, you got TSA right next door, we've got flexibility that no private sector site could ever present. So, final point is this. One of the things that Maryland and Virginia did fully agree on, and we went to the mat on it, was when, in the prior administration, this whole effort was put on hold because the White House weighed in on a political basis. What we said to the GSA and to the FBI is, all we're asking to do is, you set out a criteria. We very much honor the notion of having this additional consultation, but the law of the land said additional consultation, didn't say change the criteria. And what we want is this to be a fair, transparent process where outside politics is not further intervening. And at the end of the day, what's in the best interest of the taxpayers, what's in the best interest of the men and women of the FBI, not just for today, but going forward, and what will represent the kind of changing nature of the workforce of the FBI to more reflect the changing face of Virginia and the changing face of America. With that, I'll take questions. We got another.
Before question, I just want to thank some of the folks who came with us, and then we'll open it up. We had a group of about 15 Virginians that made really important presentations, leading off with the governor. But I just want to show you sort of the breadth of our group. President Greg Washington, most of you know President Washington, George Mason, talked an awful lot about existing partnerships with the FBI that could be furthered. Adam Lee is the Chief Security Officer at Dominion, talked a little bit about the protection of the grid and infrastructure at the site, but frankly talked more about his career as an FBI special agent, including serving in Northern Virginia and DC, and the compatibility of the site. President Irma Becerra, we have two university presidents, both engineers, which is interesting. Irma Becerra at Marymount University, Virginia's first Hispanic serving institution, talked about the workforce training that already happens there and more that can be done. And then finally, Andrea Bailey. Andrea is the county supervisor in Prince William, in eastern Prince William, including the Quantico site that has significant FBI equities, and she talked about her role on the board and as an advocate and as a military spouse with a lot of time in at Quantico over the years. Now we'll open it up.
Senator, I have to ask you about two things that were said by Governor Moore yesterday. Will your site cost $1 billion more? Governor Moore, his words not mine yesterday, said that if you ignore the executive order on racial diversity here, that it would make a mockery of what the president promised.
Respectfully, those cost estimates are totally wrong, out of left field, and have no basis in fact. I say that as the senator from Virginia. I say that as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, number one. And number two, we, and I want Tim to echo on this, we welcome the equity comparison. But the idea that you're not also going to compare cost, transportation, flexibility of site, and the needs of the FBI, to ignore those would also be, I think, a disgrace to the Biden administration and to the men and women of the FBI.
Who is suggesting that we ignore the equity executive order? No one. No one is suggesting that. We embrace it. This is the first major site decision that will ever be made by the GSA that includes a specific equity component. We embrace that. We embrace that. So the notion that somebody's going to ignore it, no, we embrace it. We just assert that the Springfield site meets and exceeds the equity criteria.
Senator, your argument is proximity to equating equity with diversity, though, when you talk about that Fairfax County is the second wealthiest county in America, and that it's hard to argue that they've been left behind on the equity scale the same way Prince George's has. And that you just sort of
Excuse me, let me just answer your question. Equity in America today, and equity in terms of the needs of the FBI, reflect racial equity, reflect faith-based equity, reflect ethnic equity, Springfield, African American, Latino, Asian Pacific. To ignore the broad breadth of equity in America would be a huge disappointment. And the other comment, there were decisions made, and Jerry Connolly could speak to this better than I, 15, 20 years ago, where the adjacent communities decided where they wanted to put their priorities. Fairfax County put their priorities in investing in one of the nation's best public education systems. People have voted with their feet. The number of immigrants that have come because they wanted that public education system. Don't penalize the investments that were made that maybe other jurisdictions didn't choose to make. Right here.
Senators, proximity to Quantico was rated 35% weighted.
Excuse me. That is just flat out wrong.
The criteria.
No, the criteria. The 35% said needs of the FBI. Quantico was one of 5 items listed. Mission compatibility, collaboration with the adjacent parts of the intelligence community. It is just factually wrong.
Maryland is arguing.
It is factually wrong. And listen, rather, again, we want the GSA and the FBI to make this decision choice. Ask the GSA. Look at the criteria. People are that misrepresentation, and the idea that suddenly you shouldn't consider the amount of traffic between FBI headquarters and Quantico. Think about that from the sustainability stem. And this is why the former intelligence professional we had was so important today. The FBI's job right now is not only to deal with Quantico, but I can tell you the amount of time the FBI has to deal with the CIA, the NRO, the NGA, the Director of National Intelligence, the fact that they have to also potentially go to the FBI Records Center, which is up in Winchester. I mean, those are just facts. I mean, Maryland, I'm sure they were promoting the proximity to the NSA, terribly important as well. But don't, respectfully, I just say, look at what the criteria said. 35% based upon mission compatibility, and they list a series of factors. How they weigh one of those factors versus another, I don't know. But we made the case across all of those factors.
Do you believe that it's fair to the taxpayer that criteria gets 35% and cost of the build-out is only 10%?
We think we are more successful than the Maryland site on cost and compatibility.
Senator, you said it was flat out wrong that Maryland sites were significantly cheaper. Could you explain why exactly
the site in Springfield is owned by the U.S. government, irrespective of whether we or Maryland win the FBI. The current tenant is moving. That has been the policy of the last 3 administrations.
Do you know if the GSA is considering that in the cost calculation? Do you know how exactly they will interpret that criteria?
The GSA has they committed to us that they have a current site selection plan, and in the cost component of that plan, they are not looking at costs connected with other projects. They're just looking at the cost of the FBI project. So that's what they committed to us today, and that gave us some sense of assurance.
Senators, Governor Moore said yesterday that he wants Joe Biden, the president, to weigh in on this. Is there concern if Joe Biden weighs in on this, that he'll weigh in favor of Maryland over Virginia?
We're not concerned about that, but we don't think asking somebody to put their thumb on the scale makes any sense here. The FBI and GSA have set out criteria that are good criteria, and they should follow those criteria. I mean, usually where I come from, asking a thumb on the scale is a bad thing. You know, we want to avoid thumbs on the scale rather than encourage and promote thumbs on scales. So we don't encourage thumbs on scales. We just say you got criteria, look at the criteria and make a decision.
And again, one point comment on this as well. And there was lots of speculation of why the previous administration did it. Maryland and Virginia were outraged when the previous administration, White House, put the thumb on the scale to try to slow down this process. And there was speculation about why they wouldn't want the FBI to move and what the FBI might pose in terms of location for other facilities. We think there's a process here. We think it ought to be fair. We think it ought to be transparent. And I think would be a huge mistake to have political thumbs on the scale at this point.
If you're thinking that this is your final meeting with GSA and you have
Again, I think they've said they're gonna go back for further consultation. I mean, they're gonna go back, they didn't say further consultation. They said they want to go back and kind of work through this. We don't have a timeline. You know, the one thing that we all agreed on, I'm sure our friends in Maryland would as well, this process, we're close to 12 years now. It's gone on way too long. Last question, right here.
Maryland was coming in yesterday, obviously arguing for these criteria to be reweighted. What was the upshot from GSA about whether they would consider reweighting?
Let's put it like this. The Maryland delegation, some members of the Maryland delegation, were very forceful in the negotiation around the final budget bill about trying to force the Budget Act to require reweighting of the criteria. Tim and I were in the room. There was a compromise. That compromise was you get another consultation, but the law is quite clear. There's going to be, if they follow the law, no reweighing of the criteria. Thank you all very much.
Supervisor, could we ask you a question? Supervisor?
Please help me! Help! Help! Million people are dead in Tigray of Ethiopia. Is anybody care?
Remember your time.
Is anybody